It isn't just a drink for most people anymore, is it? More than 500,000 kids in the US are considered alcoholics before they graduate high school. 6.1 million kids are raised in a household with at least one alcoholic parent. 150,000 adults die from alcoholism every year, and every hour, 2 people in the US die because someone was driving drunk. If alcohol is just a drink, the jail is just a room, and a grave is just a hole. Social acceptance of alcohol makes it harder to quit drinking. It makes it harder to notice when someone has a problem. Alcohol is so pervasive in our world that we were convinced for decades that alcohol was actually healthy sometimes. And here come the comments.
Oh, well, Andrew, it is because blah, 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 blah.
Listen, not everybody has or will develop an issue with alcohol. Yet more and more people are deciding to get sober with each passing year. It is like a global switch has flipped and people are going, yeah, waking up hungover fucking sucks. Or like people have gone to the gym, they see their calorie counter on their Apple Watch and they're going, I'm going to have to run for how long to burn off a glass of wine? Regardless of the reasons, I can think of few, if any, drawbacks to sobriety. I've been sober my entire life, but I'm not here to stand on my soapbox because I don't think that it's just purely a bad thing. In moderation, it can be used to deepen friendships or to have fun, and it can be good for some folks sometimes. But when some people realize that moderation just is not a word in their vocabulary, that's where people like Shea Fairbanks come in. I happened upon Shea on Instagram and saw 2 things that immediately caught my attention: sobriety and high performance. After years as a music producer, Shea has made a massive pivot in his life into coaching both fitness and sobriety. And he has got some amazing content on his Instagram at shea.fairbanks that I know you're gonna like. If you've been listening here for a while, I think you'll find there's something familiar about Shea, like a buddy that you just haven't seen in a while, but he still kind of knows exactly what you need to hear. He and I are going deep today on a ton of topics about sobriety, holistic health and fitness, addiction, the traumas behind it, peer pressure, and the judgment around sobriety, the really shocking reason why most addicts get deep into fitness, and the deceiving reason why most people don't want you to get sober and will actually try to get you to break it. If this is your first time here, I make bi-weekly deep dives into fitness, nutrition, and wellness pop culture trends, as well as holistic bodybuilding and powerlifting content. So make sure to subscribe to hear more of that. For today's Amazon gift card giveaway, put a comment saying why you chose to either get sober or why you personally don't want to get sober. So with all that out of the way, guys, my name's Andrew with Holistic Motion. Let's get into it. I've been sober my entire life. When I tell people that I don't drink, there's always usually some kind of like, wow, that's amazing, or it's something that they tend to be like impressed by in some kind of way. My usual response to that is to downplay it in some way, because for me it doesn't really mean anything, right? Like it's just something that I've kind of always done. So it would be like someone being impressed that I drink water in the morning. It just doesn't really mean anything to me personally. It seems like as more time goes on, alcohol has kind of like taken this place on a moral hierarchy, socially speaking, where it seems like it just kind of keeps getting a little higher and a little higher and a little higher, in the sense of, if you go up to someone and say, hey, I don't do heroin, they're like, yeah, you should not do heroin. But then you say, oh, I don't smoke weed. They go, oh, really? That's interesting. Why is that? And then you say, I don't drink alcohol. They're always like, oh, what happened? Or they assume there's like some major thing behind it, whether it's addiction or losing a family member or a loved one or something like that. What's been your experience with that?
Oh man, it's tough because definitely on the road towards having an addiction, having a problem of some sort. I was definitely trending that path, and I saw a post on Facebook. Essentially, what happened. This is how I quit. I saw a post on Facebook of a buddy who had just finished 100 days sober, and I'm a very competitive guy. Competitive with myself. I'm not that much of like a team sport competitive guy, but competitive individually. And he said, I challenge you to do 100 days sober. And he said, I actually don't think you can do it. I don't think you can do it at all. And right when he challenged me, I was kind of at like that fork in the road of like, do I stay on this path and just fall into degenerate alcoholism or quit? And there was like in that moment that I just decided like, let's try 100 days sober, see what happens. Like, what what can I lose, really?
What was the general reaction from people around you?
Oh man, in the beginning, it was like, what's why don't you drink? Like, what's wrong with you? Or I get a lot. I used to get a lot of like, oh, you must be really fun at parties. Like, I don't even go. If I go to a party now, I'm there for like an hour. I say hi and goodbye, and then I'm gone. And I go home and do something that I actually enjoy. So it's like for me, in the early days, it was a lot of like, what's wrong with you? Or like, what are you an alcoholic? Was usually the question I get more often than not. Like, are you an alcoholic? And I'd have to answer some way of like, no, I'm not an alcoholic, but I don't like, I just don't want to drink. It's just like such a weird place to be. And it's very challenging just because people I find often want to, it's, they want you to drink because it makes them feel better about the fact they have this shitty habit that they can't get rid of.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, I'm just doing something for myself to make myself feel better. And then I started feeling really good. I actually saw someone the other day, I this old bartender that I used to sit at his bar all the time, and I'd have 6-7 drinks a night type thing. I wasn't an everyday drinker, but I was having a drink most days. And he was like, "Oh, you're still dry." And I was like, "Yeah, still dry." He's like, "Oh, interesting." He's like, "I got some new alcohol-free beers coming into the bar. You should come in and have one." I was like, I don't really drink those anymore. Like, he's like, "Oh, you don't like the taste or like what?" I was like, "I just don't know why I would simulate something I don't need anymore. Like, why would I simulate it with like, there's no benefit of drinking a non-alcoholic beer. There's no benefit of drinking an alcoholic beer, but I've kind of just switched to drinking soda water or water."
There is this really like weird sort of crabs in a bucket thing, as played out as that phrase is, where it's like, oh, okay, you're not drinking, and people kind of take that as almost like it means something about them. So it's like, okay, well, if they start drinking again, then that means I'm more okay in what I'm doing right now. And that's not to say that there's necessarily something morally wrong with alcohol, but I think it's telling in a certain way that when you don't drink, people are impressed by it usually. What do you think that is that's going on there, that it's like people are congratulatory and impressed by people when they don't drink, but then for themselves they're like I need to get this person to drink so I feel okay about drinking. What do you think's going on there?
That's a good question, because there's definitely a large number of people that are like, "Wow, congrats, man! Like, you must feel amazing." Like, I do. I feel freaking fantastic. Like, you should give it a try. It's kind of how I feel like responding, but I'm usually like, thank you. And the man, it's such an interesting situation between people being proud of another person's success in getting sober. And I think what they see is that by getting sober, you're actually able to escape all the, like, I was able to heal all the fucking parts of myself that I were the catalyst for why I started drinking in the first place. I was able to, and now I'm not saying I'm 100% healed by any means, and I never will be, but I've done a bunch of healing work in that shadow realm and in that realm of what happened in my childhood, to be able to come to a place where I'm, self-accepting of it. I have love for myself again. I have gratitude for those experiences that I endured. So I think they see someone that is self-accepting, who loves themselves, has confidence, has deep gratitude for themselves, is like boosting their human performance in all areas of, like, I sleep better, I hydrate better, I work out, and I can do CrossFit 6 days a week and abuse my body, and my recovery time is 12 hours. And most people's recovery time, if they're drinking alcohol, I think is like 4 days, 7 days. So it's just like the little things like that. And then being able to do other things to build physical and mental resilience, long sauna sessions, ice baths, meditation, prayer, breath work, all of the other things that I've incorporated into my life, people see. So I think it's similar to a lot of people that get sober. They start adding things into their lives that weren't there previously because all they had was drinking and doing things that associated with alcohol. And once they eliminate it, they start doing all these things. Like, I have so many friends that are ultra runners that are sober. So they got sober, and then they're like, you know what? I actually really like this thing called running. And I'm kind of the same. I'm kind of the same way, because when I quit drinking, I was like, I need something to fill my time.
Right.
So I started going to the gym a lot, and I started running a lot.
There is something interesting about fitness where it seems to always kind of become either a vehicle to get sober, or it becomes the replacement for whatever the habit was, right? So you usually, if it's the former, people will like start exercising, they look at their calories, they look at their macros, and they go, holy shit, this isn't really feasible anymore if I'm gonna get XYZ goal. How did those two things kind of come together for you?
Oh, I mean, I was working out 5-6 days a week prior to getting sober. I was just working out, eating, but eating clean, but not gaining muscle, not gaining size, not gaining in any of the ways I wanted to gain. And I've always had this issue with gaining muscle, gaining weight. I've always been slim. So when I drank, I wouldn't eat. I would just drink. So I got all my calories from alcohol. And most people, when they drink, they also eat shitty foods, then they get really fat. I would just drink, and my calories all came from alcohol and whatever I mixed it with. So that was my diet for the most part. So I'd work out, and I'd have a couple beers after. Maybe I'd eat and have dinner, but there'd be 3 or 4 beers with dinner and after a workout. And it wasn't like, when I got sober and then I started working out, I noticed instantly, like, my sleep improved within about 10 to 14 days type thing. My hydration, like, I could actually like start to notice and feel all the things, like, oh, I was still working out 5-6 days a week, but now doing it sober, I started building muscle, like I almost want to say overnight, but like, it wasn't overnight, but it was fairly quickly. I started actually seeing returns from all the work I did in the gym. And that was like, interesting. Maybe this healthy habit that I have of going to the gym is creating, the results that I actually want to see elsewhere in my life.
I don't think people, I feel like a lot of people really don't understand all the different downstream effects from not drinking, right? You mentioned the sleeping better, you mentioned, the food that you eat and stuff. So you used to be an audio engineer, if I heard correctly in another podcast, right?
Yeah, music producer.
Music producer. Okay, so
less of the less of the engineering stuff.
Got you. So I was in a touring metal band for many years, and like I said, sober through all that. But being, in fact, my whole band was sober. Funny enough, but we we'd go to a show. We'd be hanging out with all these other bands, and even just being out late, 11, 12, 1 a.m., whatever, the show finishes, the immediate thing after is like, okay, well, we're hungry. What's open? Denny's and a couple shitty burger joints. So I'm from Nevada. If you know anything about Nevada, it's probably Vegas. And Vegas, for the most part, tends to influence a couple of the other cities. So where I'm from specifically is Reno. And when I was still living there, just 24-hour city, you could get almost any food at any time. And yeah, just getting off, just finishing up a show. It's like, okay, we're tired and hungry. We're going to go eat some shitty food. You compare that to other jobs out there like bartending or food service. Again, it's usually like an off late gig. But with all of these things, once you kind of step out of that, you change the environment. Usually the eating shitty stops. Usually your friends kind of start changing a little bit, which is really sad for a lot of people. And I think that's a huge hang up for people when it comes to getting sober, is how much your circle changes. And then, your recovery improves. Just all these different things start changing. And I feel like people just don't know until they experience it, What
Totally.
was like the biggest one for you when you're just like, oh shit, like this thing that was not good, or this thing that is now very positive in my life was because of alcohol, because of quitting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good one. First, I mean, my brain kind of goes to two things first. Number one, my relationships, and number two, my mental clarity. So my relationships really improved because as a drinker, as an alcoholic, or whatever words you want to use, I don't love the word alcoholic, but for the most part, people who drink have, I'm not going to say everyone, but there is an element of people pleasing that goes into it. There's an element of codependency in those relationships. And and codependency can be something as simple as someone else has a habit, and instead of talking about it and talking about the negative side of that habit, they just brush it under the rug and will just not talk about it. And that is codependent in keeping that person's habit alive, even though it's like BS. So that was the big thing. Is like, how do I? So my relationship started improving. I started. It kind of like, I got sober, and at the same time as I got sober, I read No More Mr. Nice Guy. So it
Yeah.
was like this deep dive into people pleasing, boundaries, codependency, all the things that were like
Masculinity, understanding
masculinity,
yourself.
all
Yeah.
the things in myself at the time. So like, it was a deep, it was a deep transformational period for me. It was great. It was hard as hell. Um, but it was a beautiful time as well. So like, it created better relationships. So that's number one. I learned how to, lay down a boundary, and like, this is something, this is what I'm drawing a line in the sand on, and I'm okay with everything here, but nothing over here. And then it was, and codependent relationships started to heal those, work through those, start seeing patterns, triggers, et cetera, that were in my life, whether I was dating or not dating, or in my family relationships or my friendships. And the other big side is like, the friend circle changes for sure. And I think a lot of people do worry that, I think the two things that people worry about, and I'll get back to mental clarity in a moment. The two things people worry about the most when they give up drinking is their friend circle is going to change, number one. And that's kind of terrifying.
Oh yeah.
The other side is they have to grieve the process that they might never drink again.
I am so glad that you're talking about this.
And people struggle so hard with that second thing, how to grieve the fact that you might never have a drink again. Even when I did the 100 days sober, I said I'll do 100 days, then I'll go back and have a beer. I got to 100 days and I said, let's go 6 months. And then I got to 6 months and I said, let's go 12 months. And I got to the end of 12 months and then I was like, I'm not going to drink again. Like that just kind of became my lifestyle. And everything kind of changed in that year. It was also in the middle of the pandemic. And so there was all of that. There's lockdown and I couldn't do anything anyways, but I got sober in that period. And so at that 12-month mark, I really had to like grieve the fact that I'm probably never having a drink again. And I'm okay with that. And I have a lot of people that are friends that follow me. They're like, I support what you're doing. I still drink. And I want people who do still drink to know one thing is just because I'm sober and I had a shitty relationship with alcohol, you might not. You might have a totally normal relationship with alcohol. And that's totally, great for you. I'm happy for you. And just because I make stuff, I'm not here to demonize alcohol, that it's all bad. It was bad in my life, and it created a lot of bad things in my life. But I'm not here to say that you can't go and have a drink if it doesn't affect you the same way as me. But if it does even marginally, I suggest people, do a deep analysis, look at your relationship with alcohol and see.
Well,
So
at
that
least,
was like a big thing.
oh,
So
sorry,
then the
cut
other
out a
side,
little
getting
bit.
back mental. Oh, I was just going to go to the mental clarity piece was the other like big win for me, relationships and mental clarity, like having that mindset shift of like, oh, I'm a non-drinker now. This is my lifestyle. I have no brain fog. I want to do that. Okay, well, I know the steps to get there now. Whereas when I was drinking, I want to get there, and it would just be like this fog between that goal and where I'm at in the present moment.
I feel like removing the moral aspect of drinking is a big piece for a lot of people. Like you said, you can still hang out with friends who do drink, and you're not looking down your nose at them. Last year, or was this 2 years ago? I don't know. A year or two ago, a friend got married, and I was a bridesman for her whole group. So I'm literally at a bachelorette party with like tons of women, and then we ended up running into her husband out and all of his friends, and I'm basically sober buddying 14 people, just hammered out of their fucking minds. I'm basically the only person that remembers that night, and at no point during that am I going, "Oh, I'm better than these people," or "Oh my god, they don't know how fucking good it would be if they quit drinking." There's, don't get me wrong, I do believe that things probably would improve. But that's only so much as it's having a negative impact on them. It's like, there's like a ton of money that goes into the supplement space, and a lot of people are always like, oh, like what supplement do I need to take to get XYZ better? And it's like, hey, adding something in is only going to improve things as much as you have a deficiency. So it's like just cutting alcohol doesn't automatically make things better. Cutting alcohol will improve things proportionally for how bad alcohol is for you. So it's also not to say that it's like, hey, once you stop drinking, everything about your life will be better. It's like, no, only the parts of your life that are negatively impacted by it are going to get better. The friends and how you interact with them. I always think about it, how me staying sober was probably a lot easier than the average person because all of my friends were also sober. Like I think you and I are probably around the same age, you're early 30s or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you by chance know what straight edge is?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm the last straight edge person on the fucking planet, evidently. I was in a straight edge hardcore band.
Oh,
All
wow.
my friends were straight edge. Like if it were not for that, I'm not saying I wouldn't have been sober, but it probably would have made it a lot more challenging. I still always had people, offer to like smoke me out or like offer to buy me a drink or hey, come drink with us or whatever, and I'm just like, no, I'm good. But then I look at my sister, um, who I I think she's sober right now. She's kind of figuring out her relationship with certain things. But I know that for her, alcohol was, for the most part, a matter of one, managing social aspects. She has quite a bit of social anxiety, so it becomes this bridge to communicate and be fun and kind of lower inhibitions to have fun with people. But also, it it ended up being a way to process, probably in a negative way, but still process a lot of struggles throughout her childhood. So sometimes I'll look at her and I go, okay, you and I both had a pretty fucked up childhood. For whatever reason, alcohol and drugs kind of became your thing, and it didn't for me. And I have no idea why that is. And there's no judgment about my sister for going a different direction than I did. But it is interesting how much our childhood and how much the traumas that we experience um, will impact us in the future. So you and I have actually had a very similar childhood, which it was interesting because like the first message I think I sent to you was, "Oh my God, there's another one of me," or something like that. Seeing another like sober fitness person. But then to go a little bit deeper, I hear about some of the experiences that you had in your childhood, and it was like, shit. Then you're replying to me and being like, I didn't know that this was as common with other people. And I've got this like 3 hour long podcast coming out about men's mental health and all these different things. Which for anybody on YouTube, when it comes out, it's probably going to be 6 to 8 weeks from now. I'll link it up top. But what's been your one? Could you share some of what happened throughout your childhood? How that impacted you later in life, and why you think alcohol was the go-to for that.
Oh man, that's a deep question. There's a lot to unpack here, so that's a good thing.
Oh yeah.
So I can share. I'm not going to share the details. I don't think anyone wants to know the details. I don't even really care to share the details.
Right.
Like the specific details,
Of course.
as you know. But so when I was 3, I was sexually abused by a bus driver. 3 and 4, sexually abused by a bus driver, and that happened quite a few times. And I didn't tell anyone about it until I was obviously much older, in my 20s, when I started processing it.
I was 25 when I finally said it.
Yeah, so it was probably around that 23 to 25 mark where I finally started to process, started to share it, start to look into that side of things. But before that, obviously, I didn't. I was 3 and 4. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't share that with anyone, family. Didn't share it with my parents. Nothing. And then when I was 8, my father passed away unexpectedly and very suddenly, a couple of days before Christmas. So it'll be 26 years this year.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. So it was just, he had a heart attack playing hockey. It was a total freak thing. It's not like the heart attacks that hockey players, soccer players, and athletes seem to get these days, which we can talk about later if you want. It's totally different. It's a totally different.
Getting into the
heart condition.
Died unexpectedly realm is an interesting one that YouTube is not a huge fan of.
Yeah, we don't have to get into that. So the one, my father passed away of a heart attack. Before passing away of a heart attack was a common thing. At a young age, he was 35. So,
right. Wow. So you must be about his age now. Yeah.
I turn 35 next year.
I'm really curious what that is like. Cause I, I just had this realization a couple days ago. I'm older than my mom was when she had me. And I was like, holy shit, I'm not married. I don't have kids. That's fucking crazy. What is that like coming up on the age of your father when he passed away?
Ah, man, I've been thinking about that for you know, it's actually I've been thinking about it like this year since being 34 and thinking about like the things that he had. He had 4 kids and a wife and a job and was in school and working on his PhD and all kinds of other things. And it's like how and I look at myself and I'm like, I'm unmarried, I have no kids, I'm single, I'm a coach, I don't have a PhD.
Mm,
I've been a music producer for a long time. So it's like I have different life experiences obviously than he did.
mm,
Um, and it's not to say that one's better than the other. It's more just as I get closer to the age in which he passed away, yeah, I don't know if I've fully come to terms with what it feels like. My older brother's 36, so I'm sure and I've asked him about it. And he's like, oh, just another year. So he doesn't. I mean, he
that
doesn't
is
think about it.
so wild to me. That is
He
so
doesn't.
wild to me. It's I don't know if this is like a weird like unique psychology thing or what, but like I talk to other people about certain experiences that that they've had and that I've had, and it's really strange how some people can like talk about things or have certain experiences and be like, oh yeah, so that happened, and then they just kind of like move on from it. And of course, there are certain things in my life that I can do, but it's funny because I'll think about these things. Holy crap, I'm my mom's age, and when she had me, and it's just like that's nuts. That is so crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so kind of circling back. So your father passed away when you were 8. You had this childhood sex abuse situation that happened when you were 3 to 4. Um, Continue on from there.
Okay. And then so then my mom remarried kind of around I want to say like when I was about 10, maybe 10, 11, to this other guy, and we knew him. I didn't know him very well, but we knew him from the area, and and everything was kind of fine in the beginning. But I kind of so beginning of their marriage, everything was kind of fine, and I discovered alcohol around the age of 12. I was I used to cry a lot. I was really soft. My brothers would call me a pussy. That would be the word that they would have used back then. Um, and to toughen me up, this is kind of fucked up to even think about it. To toughen me up, we used to have like battle royale where they'd either like hold me to a tree and like beat me up, or they'd just let us brawl and we just go in the basement and it'd be like myself versus my
Ugh.
older brother, or myself versus a buddy, or myself versus my younger brother, and we just brawl. We'd have bare knuckle brawls with each other to toughen me up, and face shots, and like everything was allowed.
Mm.
And
Toxic masculinity. I'm just kidding.
once I kind of essentially, and
Yeah.
essentially like once I would get beat up at the end of it, we'd always go to my this one friend's house, and his dad worked up north in Alberta, oil and gas. Was never really home, and this kid was like 12, but would kind of hang out by himself. Maybe have a babysitter come for a couple days or something. But his dad stocked his beer full of, or his fridge full of beer, and we would after the fight. I don't know what happened, but someone cracked a beer and said, "Drink this; it'll take your pain away."
Go get hammered to numb your wounds, more or less.
And I started drinking at 12, and you'd have battle royale, and then you'd have a beer after as a reward for getting your ass kicked.
Mm.
And it just became like this: if I drink this, it will numb, all my pain will go away, and all my pain in the moment did go away, and I wouldn't think about dad, and I wouldn't ever think about. I never thought about the sex abuse stuff, but that was pushed so far down into my mind, and it wasn't
Right.
until later when it resurfaced. But so everything that was troubling me would get numbed out with alcohol, and I started drinking, but it wasn't like every day. It would be like a drink here or there, 12 till about 16, I want to say. Yeah, didn't really drink too much in that period. It wasn't like a full-blown habit or anything, but I was introduced to it, and I would openly and actively have drinks in that period. Around that 13, 14, 15, 16 time in my mom's marriage with this other guy, that's when the physical and verbal and mental kind of abuse started happening from his side. So that was a lot. And so to deal with, I've talked to many therapists and counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists over the years, and they consider those moments big T trauma moments. And to have 3 big T trauma moments before the age of 18 is big. It's
not quite in line with the norm.
It's not the normal thing for most people. And so I find, and it's not to paint the whole picture of being a victim or anything. I'm not. I'm actually rather grateful for all of those experiences because they've shaped me into who I am. So it was in that period, 16, and then they separated. They ended up getting divorced. My mom's remarried to this amazing man, and he's supportive and supportive and loving and all the things. So my mom actually has, more or less she has a happy ending to the story, and so do the rest of us, because our new stepdad is fantastic. He's been around for a long time, and we all really love him. So that's the happy side of that. But it was kind of in that period where that's when, around 16, the drinking, I started sneaking, whether it's a bottle of wine or a bottle of whiskey from my former stepfather's collection, drinking that, like really starting to get into kind of the harder stuff than just beer. We'd obviously take his beers and drink them all, and started getting into the drugs a little bit. And it only started with weed, and that was kind of like the thing, but it wasn't like when I got 17, 18, started getting into using cocaine a little bit. That became a bit of a habit. I don't really tell people that I really had much of a habit with it, because it doesn't really come up that often. And I've been sober from drugs since St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2013.
Hell yeah.
So
dude,
10,
you hit 10 years. Congratulations.
Thank you. 10 years drug free. I feel really good about that. And so that one, it kind of just was like, it was an issue, but it wasn't like a habit issue. But the drinking one was, I drank from that entire period, from 16, and there were quite a few bad moments, like a moment where I stopped drinking or stopped breathing from going unconscious while drinking, get my stomach pumped a couple times. Like there's just a couple moments in there, there was like a good handful of moments in those years where I was definitely had alcohol intoxication, would come home from the bar and puke from the amount of alcohol I had. And that happened quite a few handful of times. And then it's around the same time as I started actually processing the childhood sexual trauma. Around that 23 to 25 mark, that's when I started to not have those nights of alcohol intoxication. Like I would drink a lot, and I could drink a lot, but I'd get to a point and then I'd kind of stop drinking in that night. I would never drink into that place where I was fully out of control, that I couldn't like couldn't get home or couldn't, etc. So I would still drink a lot, and that was an issue. So I don't know if that answers the story, but it definitely gives a bit more.
I think that
More
answered it.
there's
So it was
more
kind of
meat on the
something
bone
where
there.
you were. I gotcha. It was something where you were noticing that, like, at some point in time, you started noticing that this was kind of being used as a band-aid. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm when the childhood sex abuse stuff started coming up.
Gotcha. So
That's when I
there's
really started looking at, like, holy shit, like it started, it forced its way back into my mind from the deepest part of my brain.
mm,
And I was forced to face it. I was forced to start to deal with it and process it and talk to someone. And it was in that area, like at 18, I started working with a counselor here in Calgary. Fantastic guy. I don't even know if he's still doing what he does, but his name is Christian. He was fantastic. And I started processing, like, the grief and dad's passing and all this stuff tied up around my father's death. And that really started those wheels in motion, like 18 to 24, 20, like 23, 24, 25. In that period, I did all the dad stuff, and then I got into the child sex stuff. And it wasn't until like later 20s that I started processing the other stepfather stuff, the stepfather stuff. And it's been a long healing journey from like 18 to 34.
Are you
Doing,
familiar with the rat cocaine study to like test like dopamine and meaning?
I'm familiar with it. I might need to be refreshed. So
Yeah, I'm gonna butcher it, but it more or less can be summed up as there's a rat and it's given a chance to, push a lever, and that lever gives it cocaine, and then it gets this, dopamine hit, and then it goes, oh, that was nice, and then it goes over and presses it again, and then it presses it again, and then it presses it again, and it keeps on doing that. But then as soon as they give the rat a way to experience, meaning in its life, or have some kind of purpose that it's working toward, which I can't remember exactly how they tested that, even though it still has access to this lever, it stops. And you said something that I've said, I don't know how many different ways at this point, but it's like, and this actually comes up with an interview that I have on that men's mental health episode as well, which is more or less like, bad things have happened to you. Yes. What now? It's like it's fucked up to think that, like, you still have to move forward. You still have to find a way to move through this, and to make meaning out of it. So like Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talks about logotherapy, where it's like everybody has trauma. You have to find a way to almost do like some kind of fucking alchemy on it, where it's like, okay, you have shit, you still have to turn it into something meaningful. And it is fucked up that the solution is to almost find like gratitude in these horrible situations, right? But it's like, okay, well, it doesn't matter how fucked up it is. You still have to do it if you're going to move forward. And there's a lot of people that I think get hung up on it. One of the things that you said was, okay, well, I'm not a victim of this. But a lot of people, I think, get hung up on that, where it's like, no, I am a victim. Somebody did something awful to me. Somebody did X, Y, Z. How did you make that switch? Because I had to do it as well. How did you personally go from like I've got a post on my Instagram that says something like, um, I'm not the boy who got sexually abused. I'm a man that overcame it. That's kind of
mm,
how I shifted that for myself personally. How did you do it?
oh, I don't even know if I actually know the moment that it like fully shifted. But there just came a time, and there's this fantastic counselor in Calgary that I worked with, kind of right as I was getting sober as well, as a lot of that stuff started coming up again, and he himself had childhood sex abuse and had a really rough childhood and used drugs and alcohol for a long time before becoming a counselor. So he had that real world experience of all the things I was kind of going through. And so working with him in that moment, but I kind of came to that realization before I started working with him. I've been a big follower of Tony Robbins for a long time. And I remember seeing something from Tony. I want to say it was like 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. And he was talking about, and he wasn't talking about childhood sex abuse, but he was talking about the circumstances in life that people go through and the potential abuse or trauma or whatever it is. But he said, and I posted an interesting clip last night on my Instagram of a very similar clip of Tony talking about the same thing. But this is obviously a new version of him talking about it that I posted yesterday. But essentially he says you have to have self-acceptance for yourself in that situation. You have to have self-love for yourself. And then the gratitude comes after that. But you first have to master those other two, and then the gratitude comes. And it's in that, like, it's in a moment where it wasn't like it didn't happen, like it happened to me, but the way I want to word it is like it didn't happen to me, if that makes sense. Like it occurred.
Does it feel like it was a
occurred to
past
me, but it
version
wasn't.
of yourself? If that makes sense?
Yeah, completely.
Does it feel
Like
almost like it was
I don't
something
like I
that you
don't
saw be experienced?
at this point, yes. And I actually had I went away to a retreat this summer, and I had a session with
This is another thing you and I have in
soul
common, by the way.
lady. So I went to this retreat, and we saw this soul healer, and she literally said to me, and when I was having the one-on-one with her, she said, all the things that happened to you, the childhood sex abuse, the abuse from your stepfather, it didn't happen to you on a soul level. It happened to you on the physical realm. It happened to your physical body. And your physical body is resilient enough to heal itself. So my soul, she said, when the sex abuse thing happened to my body, my soul left my body in that moment, and it didn't happen to my soul. So when I'm in my body, it almost feels, as you said, like out of this body, like I'm viewing it, I'm watching it happen, but I'm not currently in my body. Like I actually, when I bring myself back to that moment and think about the different times it happened, I can view them like I'm viewing a movie, but I'm not actually in my body. Like I can't feel it.
That is exactly how I've explained it, where it's I once described it as like watching it behind smudged and fogged up glass. It was almost like I was watching an experience of someone else, which, you know, they talk about out of body experiences, and I suppose we could go down a billion different rabbit holes about what that actually is and what's actually happening there. And I have no fucking idea, and I don't know if anybody really does, but it is interesting how many people in these situations go, yeah, it was like I was watching it happen to someone else. It's so crazy to me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to circle back to something else, because you actually do some coaching for like sobriety and stuff, correct?
Sobriety, human performance, yeah, a
Okay,
bunch of things.
so human performance in the sense of like health and fitness,
Health and fitness, and just, mindset,
general wellness.
general general human performance, like
Okay.
really being your best self type thing.
Okay. So one of the things, because I've been a coach for about 12 years now. Um, One of the things that was really, really wild to me is how people will almost try to. It's like they'll try to argue with with how to gain an outcome, right? So I had one client who I love to death, but he's presently the only person in his family. He's no longer a client. He's the only person in his family um, that didn't have diabetes, right?
Wow.
He was very overweight, um, very unhealthy relationship with food, and pretty much every single time he'd come to a session, we would talk about his how he was eating and what he was doing and the pros and cons. And almost without fail, once a month, something would come up where it's, oh, I found this new protein bar. I found this new snack bar. I found this new meal replacement shake and yada, yada. And it's like he would try to negotiate with success. It's like, look, I'm not willing to eat less, but I am willing to eat this protein bar or I'm willing to eat this protein shake. I'm not willing to eat less though. Can I still lose 20 pounds? And it's like, reality is like, well, no, because you're still eating too much and you don't exercise and you still do all these other things that are not conducive toward getting your goal. And it's like, well, okay, what if I don't eat lunch, but I have this meal replacement shake? And reality is like, well, how many calories is the meal replacement shake? 500. What do you normally eat at lunch? I'll just pick an arbitrary number. 400. Okay. No, you're still over consuming on calories, right? So it was like he would try to argue with it. The one thing that I think is very complicated with food, and I guess I'll call it food addiction, even though that's kind of a tough thing to define, um, is that you still have to eat. So if you have an unhealthy relationship with food, there's no abstaining there. You don't get to
Yeah.
stop eating. You can fast for a couple of days, I guess, but at some point in time, you got to put food in your mouth, right? So people have a really, really hard time with this because you can't just stop. There is moderation is virtually the only option you have is developing that mental will, or remove all the things from your life that are not conducive. So I'm horrible relationship with sweets. I just don't keep them in my house. I eat meats, veggies sometimes, and fruit. That's it. 99% of the time. I don't have a moderation gene for whatever reason. With alcohol, it's kind of in that similar vein where you don't physically need alcohol, but a lot of people socially need it still, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking to people through this, when you're coaching them through this, how are you helping them bridge that gap of like, yes, I realize you have a mental, social, or physical dependence on alcohol. How are you helping them make that change, knowing that it is in some way kind of a cornerstone in their life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I, for the most part, most of the clients that I do work with have already stopped drinking,
Mm.
whether it be 5 days, 10 days, 2 weeks, 1 month, 4 months, etc. And they're already sober. They're starting to get the benefits of being sober. So they're starting to have improved sleep. They're starting to feel better. They have the brain fog is lifted. So they're starting to see some of those results, but it's in those other areas of their life that that I do the work with them, where we start to work on your relationships, your emotional well-being, your emotional regulation, spiritual side of things, the mindset stuff, and to a degree, the physical realm is still there. So I don't necessarily do it as as a personal trainer type thing, but looking at what someone eats as like a nutritional coach and really looking at that, what kind of stuff they're putting in their body, and it might not be drinking, but there's other sides to that they start to that I find people really need to find the things that are going to help them. And something you touched on earlier was supplementation. Someone can eliminate something. And I find people always want to add a supplement. and they message me all the time. Hey, what are the 5 supplements I should be taking right now? And I'm like, how much protein you get in a day? Like, 80 grams. Like, okay, how about you just eat like 150 grams of protein a day? And then you won't need to take the omega-3s, the protein powder, the creatine. I mean, you should be taking the creatine anyways, just from a mental cognitive benefit, but you don't need to take the omegas. You don't need to take all this other stuff. And if you, similar to you, I don't really have that moderation gene. So I have an all or nothing gene. So I usually just side on nothing. And when it comes to that, like I live the elimination diet of carnivore right now, and I'm 100% ruminant animal carnivore right now, and I love it. I am taking a supplement of liver pills because I don't like the taste of liver or the texture, and getting the nutrient benefit of organ meat supplements with all the other nutrient benefit I'm getting from the meat. So that's like the one supplement I'm taking, but I've eliminated all the other things. And so there's not many supplements. So I guess back to like the point of like the alcohol, I think like finding the biggest thing I work on with a lot of these clients is my background for a lot of my coaching stuff is performance breathing, performance breath work. And I was mentored by a guy named Laird Hamilton. He's a big wave surfer. And
This
that's who
is
I was kind of
another
mentored
really
through.
interesting thing in you and I's life is we both know Laird. That's so crazy. Sorry, continue.
Laird is amazing. So anyways, performance breathwork and XPT and all the stuff that they do over at XPT, I use that performance breathing with my human performance / sobriety clients is using things like breathwork to try, and that's where you can reprogram the mind. You can change the thought processes around human performance and around sobriety and around your mindset and your emotional well-being and your spiritual health and physical health, and all the different areas of your health I find are all tied to that element of using breathwork as the entry point.
So if so I smell breakfast getting cooked upstairs, but if people are interested in getting coaching from you, or they want to hear more from you, or kind of see what it is that you're doing, how you're going about this, where do people find you?
I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and it's Shea.Fairbanks, SHEA.FAIRBANKS. And those are the 2 spots. I have a website, but if someone is really interested, they can, shoot me a DM. I love chatting with people on there. Jump on, have a conversation, go from there.
Yeah. Dude, this was a treat. Like this, I think this literally came about because I think you liked one of my videos. I went and looked at your page and I was like, oh, I got a lot in common with this dude. And yeah, so this was very serendipitous from the Instagram gods for whatever reason, putting one of us on each other's page. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you really want to finish up with?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Feel really good.
All righty. So Shea Fairbanks at Shea SHEA.Fairbanks. And as usual, my name is Andrew with Holistic Motion. Dude, this was awesome. You speak very, very how would I put this? Very everyman. You are clearly a real person who lived this and actually went through it, and you can hear it in the way that you talk, and in I guess how you tend to approach, or it's how it sounds like you approach coaching. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to post this one, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, buddy.
What a guest, huh, guys? Please go comment on their Instagram and let them know that you saw them here. And while you're just doing things that I ask you to, make sure to click this top video that I have linked. That is the last episode of the podcast, which I guarantee will add 10 pounds of muscle to your body. I'll see you there. Later.